All right, it's 9 o'clock. Good morning. Welcome to our spooktacular cybersecurity best practices webinar. October Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I'm not sure who declares such things, but if they're going to declare it and it gives us an opportunity to talk about cybersecurity and have a little fun with it and get it on people's radar, we think that's a great thing. So we will jump right in here. That's me. I'm Jeremy Cherney. I'm the founder of Tobin Solutions. And today, we'd like you to consider today a day of curiosity and discovery. I see some names on here. I think you've been to some of our webinars before and probably some of our security webinars. Maybe you've heard some of these things before. Maybe you're going to try and catch this in the one ear while you're doing some emails with the other or something, but however you are is fine. But we really encourage you to take a look at it freshly today, like you've never heard this before, and like it's really important because there are a lot of risks out there, which is I know you know that, which is why you're here today. You want to understand that, and you might want to know about how to deal with some of it. So we're going to talk a lot about mitigations today in the form of best practices. That's really what today's about, is we're talking about best practices around security. There's so many things you can do with security, and there's so many ways you can fix and plug and avoid and all that with security to try and prevent some things. And then there's some fundamental best practices. And if you're doing those, you're going to really eliminate a lot of heartache and maybe not part with as much cash for dealing with a security event. So we'll talk about that, and certainly along the way, if there's any burning questions and answers, I guess maybe I'll have the answers or someone else in the group will have the answers, but any burning questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and at the end there'll be an opportunity for Q&A there. Let's see here. So before we jump in, what is a security event? What are we even talking about here? For us and for pretty much any cybersecurity professional, we're talking about a breach of your CIA triad. Any breach of confidentiality, a breach of availability, or a breach of integrity. Meaning, with confidentiality, you think like you've got data, right? You have data, and that there's some people that should be seeing it and some people that shouldn't, either inside your organization or outside your organization. And so anytime someone sees data that you didn't want them to see, then that's a breach. And it might be an accident, it might be a hacker, it might be employee theft, who knows, but we consider that a breach. Same thing if any data is altered in any way, right? If you send wiring instruction for someone to wire you money and someone goes in the middle of your email conversation and alters the wiring instructions to have it wired to a different location, that would be an integrity breach. And lastly, availability. If you can't get access to your data, we consider it a security breach. A lot of times that's act of God, hardware failure kind of stuff, but it could be ransomware. It could be any number of other types of things, and we consider that a security event as well. Ransomware is the big daddy here. That is the 800-pound gorilla. That is the nightmare of all nightmares, the thing that keeps people up at night. This is something that keeps me up at night, that our clients are going to get this, or that Tobin's going to get this, because it's a scary proposition when it happens. You literally will come in and see a screen that looks maybe something like this, or maybe someone will come in and report that they can't get access to their files, and then they log in and they see something like this. This is not a made-up screen. This was an actual screen by the one of the early ransomware products, and look how nice this is. It gives you a nice warning here with time to get you scared, like what's going on. It's all in red. Oops, your files have been encrypted. So they're kind of friendly. Look how nice this screen is. What happened? Can I recover my files? How do I pay? Now this is really quaint. If you look at this one, send $300 worth of Bitcoin to this address. This is an old screen. Now it's thousands or millions of dollars. So, but the concept's the same. Software gets on your computer. It encrypts all your data such that no force on earth can get it. And then they call you up or send you this message or whatever they do and say, we've got your hostage here. Do you want your data back? And then the clock starts ticking. And then you start calling and trying to deal with all this. So, and in the end, if you have to pay, just like any extortionist, we hope they're going to keep to their agreements, because this is probably, you know, the Bitcoin, this cryptocurrency is untraceable for by and large. It is, for at least for the average person. A lot of times it's someone overseas in China or North Korea or Russia or really anywhere, because anyone can do it. We're going to talk about some services that exist to make this really easy for anybody that wants to do ransomware. So again, if you have to pay, you know, you want to know that they're going to give you your data back. The goal would be, if you ever do get ransomware, that we don't have to pay, because we can restore your systems back to a pre-ransomware. You know, we want to avoid it, of course, and that's the goal with this. But as we're going to talk later on, it's hard to avoid any of this, at least, you know, to really have 100% guarantee. So, so this is a scary one. And there's a new twist to it, and that's the data exfiltration piece. So what does that mean? So for a lot of companies now, they've got these great backup and disaster recovery systems. So they get the ransomware and they can just, you know, thumb their nose at the ransomware people and the extortion. Ha ha ha, I've got great backups. We're working with a great company and they've got our back, and we did our disaster recovery test and everything's great and it works. So we're not going to pay you. And they're like, oh, okay, well, we have copies of your data and we're going to publish it on the internet. Now that may or may not be a problem for you, depending on what your business is and things like that, but it's just another twist to what's happening on here. So data exfiltration is a concept we talk about. That's one of the other concerns people have. You know, so we got the bad guy at the top sucking all your data with their big bad magnet. But then we got the friendly people down in the lower right corner here. Those might be people inside your organization. We have, you know, there are people that take data on the way out. So you might want to, you know, is there anything you can do around that? So data exfiltration is a concern. And I want you to also get, like I said, where some of these things we're talking about, there's always the concern of the hacker and all that, but a lot of these things could be internal issues or other acts of God and things like that. So that's data exfiltration. And then who are these people? You know, why would they bother with you? Like I said, we just talked about the malicious insider. That's the person that's on their way out, maybe starting a competing business, maybe a salesperson leaving, wanting to take their book of business or your systems or processes or trade secrets or any of that. And then there's the rest of the world that's doing it for whatever reason they've got. You got the script kiddies that are just kind of messing around, trying to mess with people. You got organized cybercrime. So the ransomware thing we were talking about before, that is very popular with cybercrime now. So in addition to all the other dark, ugly things that they do around drugs and human trafficking and, you know, protection rackets for businesses and things like that, they have now added and trivially added now ransomware as a service. And ransomware is something that's, they have organized gangs that go out there now to hack into the systems and then reap the rewards of the ransoms. So you got hacktivism. So you hear about things like people doing this for a cause, you know, hacking certain sites. We have cyber terrorism. We have state-sponsored terrorism. So some of the stuff that's been going down, it might be state-sponsored, or it might even be like state-sanctioned, meaning they're not necessarily going to do anything about it. They know it's happening, but they're okay with it because it's going against, you know, their enemy. So, but you know, one of the things you want to get on some of this is they're working together now. So you know, they're in some of these bigger jobs that you hear about, they could be in for months. They're spending time to understand the weaknesses and the value of the attack. Meaning, you know, are you someone that can pay thousands, or are you someone that can pay millions? Is the value of what they're about to do, what's it going to be worth to you? In some cases, they're finding when they go in, they can find PDFs of your cyber liability policies, and they know what those are paying out. And so they'll, start there. Okay, if you got $1 million cyber liability policy, I guess we'll start our ransom at $1 million. But they specialize. It's kind of it's weird to think of crime as a business, but we know it is because there's a lot of cash flowing back and forth, and they operate like businesses. And ransomware is no different. So you get people specializing. So you get some people that are all they do is they like to be the hacker that gets into the system, but they don't want the ransomware business. They just want to be able to get in, and they'll sell access to somebody else. And then that other person that they sell access to, they'll go in, they'll put the ransomware in, and then they'll go manage that attack. You have ransomware as a service now. You have companies that are set up, I use companies and loosely, right? Crime syndicates, set up gangs, they're like cyber gangs, however you want to term them, criminals setting up a website with a service saying, hey, if you would like to ransomware somebody, don't go through all the bother of figuring it out. We figured it out for you, and we'll now do it for a low monthly fee. There are services out there you can get for $100 a month to go ransomware somebody. And they have affiliate networks. So how do they make money? Ransomware as a service, they'll take a cut of it. So if you're ransoming someone, for $1 million, they might get 5% or 10%. I don't even know what the cuts are, but that's kind of how it works. So it's scary. It's a business. There's big money on the table here. They may not really care about you or your data, but if it's trivial for them to do this, if they can do ransomware as a service for $1,000 and they're going to make you pay $10,000, and they can just spread this out just as easily as you spread out your newsletter marketing and spray it out to hundreds or thousands of people and have some people click and take action and get caught, easy business. Very low overhead. So let's we can start talking about doing some of this stuff. So as security's become a bigger topic of conversation, as the hacks have been getting bigger and more impressive and more awful, and like the attacks don't get any better, they keep getting worse, this idea that you used to have a place, like the internet's a bad place, it's a big, scary place. But when I'm inside my network, when I'm inside my office, that, anything on the inside there is okay. I can trust it. I don't have to worry about it. That is quickly changing. It's been changing over time, but you're seeing more of it right now in this idea of a concept of zero trust. And this is not good. There's not an official term, I don't think, for zero trust. So you hear this around a lot. It's a theory. There might be a model somewhere around it. But the idea is that you can't just trust a computer because it's on the inside of your network. You can't just trust that printer you got from Hewlett Packard and plug it into your network and assume it's safe to use. You can't assume that new software, that version of Adobe that you just patched and updated is okay, because it comes from Adobe and you've already done it. You have to start getting into this mindset that you can't trust anything. And it's not about being paranoid. It's about reality, in the sense that we keep finding that all these things that we thought were safe and trustable were not. And now they're inside the house. It's like the horror movie. We trace the call, it's coming from inside the house. That's where a lot of this stuff is coming in. So we're going to talk more about that, but the idea is to start thinking about compartmentalizing the different systems you have, the different applications. It takes more time, it costs more money, it adds complexity, but it's safer. And it's a journey. You don't have to do it all at once. You can start building out and expanding on the zero trust in your organization. For some of you, it might just be starting with a guest Wi-Fi network, because some of you are giving your internal Wi-Fi code to, clients and partners that show up and things like that. That's an example of some form of zero trust. You've segmented out your Wi-Fi from your guest Wi-Fi from your internal. So you want to start thinking in those terms as we go through this, because this is it. This is not just meant to be a scary slide, because it's really This is going on all the time. If you go out and look at your firewall logs, if you go out and look at your email logs, you're getting stuff, you're getting attacked all the time. And you have to be right 100%, and they have to be right once. And so because they're already getting through, if you're getting that phishing email all the way through to your inbox, because it still gets through, as good as that technology is, it still gets through some of it, then you've been attacked. It's right there. Now, hopefully you didn't click on it. So it's not if, but when and how bad. And I'm thinking about this, of changing this of not if, but when and how bad. It's about how often and how bad, because it's just happening. And what they're looking for is that one weak link, that person that's going to click on the email and install the software, that computer that wasn't patched and updated properly. We'll talk more about some of these. What they're looking for in ways, and where these links are weak, is where you're violating best practices, or not honoring best practices, or not doing what you can around best practices. Okay, so as we're talking about this, you're going to maybe discover some blind spots. Like I said, listen to this like you've never heard it before. Maybe you'll hear something, or maybe there's some actions you see to take out of this, because that's really what it's about. It's a journey. It can be overwhelming sometimes with all of these things, but it's a journey. You can start with some of it and keep building and expanding on it. So this is the first thing I want you to get. Security is a process. It's not a product. We have great products, security products we use, and you definitely need various security products to enforce and manage your security. But most people are using the products we're using. We use some of the top products out there, so why wouldn't people use them? So if it's not about necessarily the product, you obviously want to be using world-class, best of breed type products. It's about who's doing the work and how they're doing it that makes the difference. How are they implementing these things? How are they managing them for you? How are they being alerted and dealing with this? And then who's actually doing the work? So as we go through these things, you're going to see there's a big process behind each thing. First process, the security assessment. You've got to know where you stand. Now, it might be a real basic security assessment. You can, as we go through some of these best practices, you're just going to know if you have it or not. And so right there, you can do kind of a best practices security assessment. But ultimately, what you really want to do is you want to really assess what your security risks are, because you have technology all over the place. You probably got your workstations, your servers, your phones. You've got your website, you've got your cloud services, you've got your social media platforms, you've got your personal technology that you might be using some of this stuff from. There's a lot to look at there. And so you want to at least be considering doing some kind of assessment around that. You also want to make sure that you want to, it's a match for your business and insurance compliance needs. You want to know what the scope of your risk is, because often that's driving this cost of cyber liability insurance. You want to look if we're following the best practices for IT security. But ultimately what you want to get, and this is what you're looking for as the person accountable for this, is partnering up with somebody that's going to give you a report with the results and actionable items that you've got for remediation, so that you can know where you're going and start to prioritize those, budget for anything, and build out your plan, whether it's things you tackle right away. Sometimes it's low-hanging fruit. It's easy peasy stuff to do. Sometimes it's more complex and more costly and takes some time. Thing is to be on that journey and start going through the process. It's not always linear. You don't have to necessarily do one before you do the next, before you do the next. Sometimes you can just start kind of doing different pieces and improve your security posture all over. This is another thing, okay? I'm telling you, it's not if, but when and how bad. Not if, but when and how bad. So if when and how bad looks like someone got a bad email and we were able to look at it and determine the scope wasn't too bad and clean it up pretty quickly, maybe you didn't click on anything, that kind of thing, a couple hours, that's what that looks like. If you actually get ransomware, you're looking between remediation costs, dealing with whatever you got to deal with, downtime if you really have not planned for it and can't recover quickly, you're looking at tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Business interruption components of it, all of that. And this is usually now carved out as a separate thing on your policy. So you really want to talk to your insurance person and make sure you have specific insurance for cybersecurity events. Now, what we're seeing also is it used to just be like, oh, you want cyber policy? Great. Click here, send us a check. Now they're like, oh, you want cyber policy? Let's assess really what you've got here. What are we covering? How much do you need? Are you following best practices? We're getting calls from clients saying they're not going to renew their cyber liability unless they implement some of the best practices we're about to show you. Not going to renew it. Not just increase the premiums, but not even renew it. So you want to be looking for that. And you want to give it some time. Sometimes we're seeing these things come through from the insurance and it's, 3 or 4 questions they want as their assessment of what they're trying to figure out for their tables to determine the cost of your insurance and whether they want to cover you. Sometimes it's like 8 hours or 12 hours of work to fill out a really lengthy spreadsheet with like dozens or hundreds of questions. So, depending on who they are and what you're getting and maybe what your industry is and things like that is going to dictate that. But best practice, call your insurance agent today if you haven't. And if you think you have this, but you haven't looked at it for like a year or two, call your insurance agent today and get an appointment with that. Because not if, but when and how bad. And it's going to be tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars without batting an eye if it's any kind of ransomware. The other thing we want you to start looking at is your business continuity and disaster recovery. Because again, not if, but when. So when disaster strikes, when the security event happens, how are you going to keep business running? What are you going to do? You want to start thinking about that now. We're going to touch on business continuity, but we're going to focus more on disaster recovery today. But you ultimately want to do both. Now, you might be wondering, what the heck are you talking about here, Jeremy? So maybe you had your favorite diner that you've been going to, and they were using, guest check pads like this for years and years, and then COVID happened, and then they switched to iPads and QR codes and all that kind of stuff. And then you go there to eat and their internet's down and they can't do anything with their iPads. What are they going to do? They're going to pull out that guest checkbook and start taking your order, right? They've got like some business continuity plan. Maybe they put this as a plan. Hey, we're moving to iPads because maybe the owner had been talking about moving to iPads for a long time, but didn't because they were concerned what happens if they can't do it. And they said, okay, well, this will be our business continuity plan. We'll keep our guest checkbooks in the back and internet's down. We can just, we can walk up, hey, honey, what do you want? How do you want your eggs? 2 eggs, burn them, that kind of thing, right? You can do that. So that's like, what does that look like for you? How are you going to talk to your clients? How are you going to deliver your services? How are you going to have this conversation with them that you're down because of a security event? All of these things go into business continuity. But disaster recovery is what's happening in the background. So business continuity is how you keep the business going. Disaster recovery is how we get you back up and running with whatever disaster befell you. What kinds of disasters are we talking about? Like, look at this tornado example. March 2011, Joplin, Missouri. It's startling. If you had your server in one of those businesses in that area, devastating. So how are you going to operate with your business? Even if your servers aren't there and they're in the cloud, you might have all your people working. What are you going to do? I mean, aside from the tragedy and the lives and people trying to get their lives together, then there's the how are they going to actually do their jobs when it gets back to that? So that kind of thing's happening. You're probably thinking, okay, well, Jeremy, I'm going to move all my stuff to the cloud because, that's a great thing. And it is, right? The cloud, there is a slow but steady march to the cloud for technology. And here's what you want to know that the cloud is really saying about what you're getting with them is a responsibility. You can't rely on the cloud for them to handle everything for you. This is Microsoft's shared responsibility model. So if you're a Microsoft 365 user, this is what you get. This is what they're expecting in your shared responsibility. This is not unlike Google's or Salesforce or all the big ones. So obviously, if you look on the right side, the dark blue, that's your on-premise stuff. You're 100% responsible for everything you have on-premise, your servers, your workstations, all of that. And then slowly, as you move more things to the cloud, more components to the cloud, they start taking on more and more responsibility. They never take responsibility for your information and data, your devices, your accounts, and they'll take partial responsibility for how you manage your accounts with the directory infrastructure. No responsibility, all yours. So if you've got that responsibility, you're going to want to know how things are handled. But you want to think about, this is Microsoft's or Google's and all that. What about those little ones you use? What about that database you use that's specific to your industry? Where is that hosted? How are they doing that? Are they having it hosted there? Are they following best practices? If they've got it hosted in a data center and they're not following best practices, they might say, oh, we're hosted at Amazon. We're hosted at Azure. We've got your stuff secure in the cloud. Best practices don't change. This is a picture of a data center from OVH, which is the third largest in the world. They had a battery fire. So if your server and its backups were all inside that one building, you were toast. So if they didn't design that we'd be making our backups to a different building, or in language, they sometimes call them different regions when you think about Amazon and Azure and some of those places that host, if they didn't do like data backup to another region, that's where your data is, burned up in a fire. So you got to watch that stuff. The cloud is not a guarantee. Here's a little bit on business continuity. This is about what we're touching on it. 7-step thing. You can go through this on your own. If you've got questions, you can come back and ask. There is a process for that, but we're not going to go through that here. That's a lot about how your business operates and how you're going to do it with no computers. So when we get into this idea, these disaster happens, what are your expectations? That is so critical. People have a lot of unrealistic expectations or unexpressed expectations about how they think this is going to go. They make a lot of assumptions. Oh, the cloud's down. I can get back up in a few minutes, right? Maybe, maybe not. They told me if this restore, we can get you back up and running in an hour. Maybe, maybe not. So you got to sit there and look. The security event happens and then the clock starts ticking, right? Bam, ransomware happens. Bam, lightning strike, something like that. Minutes, hours go by. That's where you're going to start bringing out your business continuity plan of how you're going to start working with your clients. And that's where you're going to be talking to your IT provider about how they're going to get you back up in your disaster recovery. But how long should they have to get you back up and running? That's what we call your recovery time objective. And you want your IT company to know what your expectations are around that. Because if your expectation is an hour, but it takes 12 hours, well, there's a mismatch. Same thing with recovery point objective. There's always the potential for some data loss if we have to restore your servers from a backup. If we're restoring from last night's backup, that could be 24 hours of data loss. If we're restoring from 15 minutes ago backup, that could be 15 minutes of data loss. If your backups have been compromised and we have to go to a different backup source that might have backups from 30 days ago, that's now your recovery point. You've now lost 30 days worth of data. And then you want to know what your just worst case, everything destroyed, downtime kind of thing can be. Because there's the stuff that happens most of the time, and then there's the stuff that hopefully rarely happens, the big daddy type stuff that is like, you know, can be devastating, where you might be down for days, weeks, or months. And that happens if they're not prepared. So when we talk about preparation, this is, you got to get your disaster recovery playbook together. This is, we talk about backup, we talk about disaster recovery. You've got to test it. If you don't test it, you don't really know it's going to work. And while getting a screenshot that the check mark is green, that the backup looks good is good, that's only one step. Maybe restoring a file or two, that's another good step. But restoring your servers, restoring everything back from scratch, you know, using your backup process, takes something. It might take a few hours to do it. There might be weird stuff that shows up. Maybe you've got some weird software that has, I shouldn't say weird software. You've got some software that's important to your business and the software company that, provides it has some kind of a license key that is very particular about being tied to your systems and your network. And now suddenly you're in disaster recovery mode and we're bringing up your servers in a different cloud. And now that license key gets fussy. It knows something strange happened and we have to call the software company and deal with that. Okay, well, the first time we deal with that, we better write it down and get it in the playbook so that when we have to restore from a big disaster, we know what's happening there. Okay, so that's like what a playbook is, how it's set up, who's on the team, how we do that. So you establish your expectations, you create your plan, and then you execute your plan. This is critical. This should be a big priority. This is your best practice action. Do your disaster recovery test and inspect the results. Do a full test. We find stuff. We find things that weren't protected the way we thought. It's just inevitable. And it's not about being good or bad or experts or this. We're humans. So far, I think you're all humans on there. I recognize all your names. You're all human beings that I've met or seen or talked to. So people make mistakes. You've got to test this stuff. Just like you test fire drills and everything else we do, you want to know that it's going to work when it comes down to it. If it's important to you. So do a test. Software patching. 70% of organizations that suffered a security breach had a known vulnerability that went unpatched. So you have software on your computer, you've got Windows, you've got all this stuff from Microsoft, you've got your applications that you use, your different databases and line of business applications. You've got all these extra programs like Adobe Reader and for doing PDFs, and you've got this and that and this and that, and you've got all the other stuff that's on there that you didn't even put on there that came from Dell or HP and all the drivers. There's probably 50 or 100 manufacturers of different things that are on your computer, and they all update their software periodically for new features, for security bugs and all that kind of stuff, and you need to keep it patched or you will be vulnerable. And sometimes, you get your patches that come out, we do them on the weekend. Sometimes it's like, patch now. Like there is a vulnerability that was found right now that people are actively exploiting, and organizations must patch now. So best practice, patch regularly and as needed for urgent security updates or mitigation. You want to make sure you're patching everything. You might have people that are skipping the patching. They get the alert and you think, oh yeah, Windows prompts me, I'll just let the team do that. They may not be doing it. They might be busy working or leaving for vacation or something else and leaving vulnerable systems. Equifax had a vulnerable system. They had a consumer complaint web portal that had a widely known vulnerability that should have been patched, but they failed to follow what? An internal process. Remember, security is a process, not a product. The patch existed. They just didn't follow their process to get it patched. And hundreds of millions of people's data was stolen. And then they had a bunch of other mistakes too, all along the way that allowed them to take that and then get from one place to the next. They're like a multi-billion-dollar company. Forgot to patch their website. Two-factor authentication. You want to have this everywhere. Two-factor, we're all getting pretty familiar with this now. It's not such a new concept, right? We got your fingerprint or face. Some of you might be using keys, or you get those codes that you have to use an application on your phone, or you get a message, a number emailed to you or texted to you. The idea is trying to prove that you are who you say you are, other than just someone having your ID and password. They want to know that you've got something in your control, like your body or your phone or your keys or your computer, that they say, if you're going to approve this, that it's really you doing whatever it is that say they're going to do. And you want this everywhere. And I mean everywhere. You want this at your internet registrar. Where's your domain registered? There's an account you've got somewhere. You want that protected with 2FA. You, of course, want your email protected with multi-factor. Your banking, your workstations. When you log into your Windows machine or your Mac, you want it prompting for another factor of authentication, because guess what? If somebody has remote access to your machine and has your ID and password, they can just log on as you. But if your phone's buzzing to prompt you to click a button to say, hey, you're trying to log into your phone, is that okay? They're not going to have your phone, hopefully. Same thing for remote desktops, your VPN, your mobile phone provider. You want to go check with your Verizon, ATT, all that stuff. You want to make sure those accounts are protected, including your SIM and transferring phones, things like that. So enable it everywhere, including your personal accounts. For all you business owners that sometimes email your team from your Gmail account or something, you want that protected with multi-factor as well. That'll save you. You know why it'll save you? I know it'll save you because Colonial Pipeline, you guys remember this a couple of years ago? Year and a half ago? Colonial Pipeline. Cyber attack from Russia. They shut the pipeline down for 7 days, had to pay $4.4 million. And it was a single compromised, oh, I lost a word there. The result of a single compromised password. Now, if they had multi-factor authentication on their logins, even if that password were compromised, they wouldn't have been able to get in. This one was national news. They had gas lines. You know, White House, Congress, everyone's involved when there's gas lines, right? This one got shut down. They dealt with these people, I think, through the nation state part of thing here, but nevertheless, it was a big problem. And really, I mean, you know, you hear about some of the scary, like cyber threat type stuff. The nation states are doing, you hear about some of the stuff going on with Russia and Ukraine and all that. They're using the same kind of stuff to try and take down electrical grids, pipelines, you know, disrupt the energy sector, disrupt the food production sector, things like that. So you want to have multi-factor turned on everywhere. It's so easy. Most things, there's a system for it. Now, it used to be complex. It's still tricky for some things, but most things it's pretty easy now. So do it, please. Security awareness training. Train your team. We use some of the best technology that's out there. At Tobin, we follow one of our values around technology is like best of breed technology. We use some of the best security technology available, constantly rated highly. Gartner rates it highly and recommended, and stuff still gets through. It just does. And oftentimes it's up to your people who are going to be the last thing, because that's really what the target is, right? Your people are the target for like the business email compromise. They want you to take action, to click on something, to do something, because maybe you've got, you know, your security pretty well buttoned up. So it needs somebody on the inside. They need an inside man to go do this. Well, sometimes the inside man is the unwitting person who clicked on the phishing email. So you want to train your team. Coming to a webinar like this is great. You should be doing this. You can watch this video afterwards. You can have your team watch it, but watch it more than once. Because I know some of you are hearing this differently. Sometimes we're including new information. Sometimes people just, you know, get distracted for a moment and miss something and then hear it again and then catch it that time. People need to have an awareness of these things so they can stay on top of it. So you want this, you want new people. You might, you know, who's that new person starting? Are they trained on your processes and do they understand how important security is to you? Please train your team. Put up posters, remind people. I mean, there's so many ways you can do this. There's low-hanging fruit type ways of doing it. And the other thing is, once you got people trained, they can establish their neighborhood watch. Right? I mean, remember this kind of neighborhood watch thing? I think they still have this for neighborhoods, you know, where people work hand in hand to try and keep the neighborhood safer by watching out and see something, say something, and all that kind of stuff. Same thing for computers. And it's trickier now with people not working in the office. Used to be, hey, did anyone get that weird email? You know, shouting over the tops of the cubicles. Now they might just be sitting at home and delete, don't say anything. So you want to encourage people to spread the word when something's going on. When that phishing email comes through, it might not just be them that gets it. Might be everybody's getting it. Remember what I said? Those affiliate services for the ransomware as a service, one of the services they offer is like a phishing campaign service. Oh, we'll phish for you. Click here. Here's the link. Here's the fake email. Here's the fake server. We'll send it out. So it might be your whole domain might be getting sprayed with it. And sometimes it gets through. It's amazing how bad it is, and yet it still gets through. Obvious to a human, not always obvious. I shouldn't say not always obvious to a human, but because they do click on it. But if they take the time to look and investigate and pause for a bit with some training, you got a shot, right? Because that social engineering, that fear of urgency. Remember that ransomware slide from before? The clock starts ticking, the blood starts moving, your brain kicks into I'm about to be eaten by a bear mode. You're acting irrationally, maybe doing things. We've got your, you get those things. We've got your kid. I mean, those things actually show up. Someone that's like awful. You hear someone post on social media that they were vacationing in Mexico, and then suddenly on your phone you get a message from that person saying they've been attacked in Mexico and please send, it's like they're very good at this stuff. Very good. And we're very fooled easily. We are suckers. Is there a sucker born every minute? Yes, we all are at one time or another. No one likes to get burned, but you gotta just be careful with this stuff. Educate people, print this off, put it on their desktop, laminate it, put it in the break room, periodically email it to them, test them on it. Just a reminder of this is great. They're good. They're really good. So you got to be attuned to this and do your best. You got to be watching out for anything where there's money involved, because that's the ultimate gig for most of it, right? The hacktivist might be trying to take down a nation state or some kind of statement on a war or some cause or something like that. But for most of what you're dealing with, money, money, money. They want to get in, they want to get the ransomware from you, they want to get the cash, they want to get in and do fraud, insert themselves in the middle of a conversation about wiring money, pretending, hey, I'm your boss and you're the CFO and I'm buying a business. I need you to wire $10,000 to this place. People do it. So you got to educate people. This is where money is involved. Hairs on the back of your neck should be going up every time. Is this going where it's supposed to go? Call, verify the details. It may look good. It may look just like what you were talking about. That's how some of these attacks work. Remember how we talked about they lay in wait? How they might be in the system for a while? They might be in the system watching you or watching your email flow back and forth. And then they see you send an email to somebody requesting money. And then they send an email to that person pretending to be you, saying, hey, I sent you that email about sending money. I made a mistake. Send it over here instead. That's what happens. You got to be on the lookout for all this stuff. It is a tricky, scary world. And people are so busy. That's not an excuse. They really are. They got a lot going on. The world is stressful. There's a lot of work coming their way. People are human beings. They have to make all these decisions and all these emails that come through. So, give them some help, train them, remind them. There are so many other blind spots, and this is where some of the stuff will show up in the security assessment. If I went into your parking lot and I dropped a little flash drive that said David and Zoe, 4th of October, 2014, someone's going to pick it up and plug it in. Oh my God, David and Zoe, they're precious. What is that? That must be their wedding or something, right? What is that? They're going to have their beautiful memories on there. We got to plug it in, and then suddenly you're attacked. We all are in a world now in post-COVID of People are very familiar with scanning QR codes, right? Every restaurant and bar you go to now, scan the QR code to see the menu. It's trivial to go to a website. There's so many websites, you can just type in a web address and it'll convert it to a QR code. And you can take that QR code and just print out labels and then go put them on posters and desk at tables at the bar, anywhere they want. There's so many places where these things are. It is, yeah. So some of these things, are more of a general concern, but again, it's part of that awareness for people. That's what we want people to do. Just don't automatically trust the public charging station. Think about it. Do I need to plug in here? Is this critical? Maybe it's okay. It probably is. But again, is it needed now to go from 95% to 98% on your phone? Maybe not. Maybe you don't need it right now. So you want to be thinking about that. And there's a whole world of these things to go deeper in the assessment. You want to be using good password managers. There are all kinds of systems right now being developed to have get away from passwords. And there's still a lot of passwords out there. And so you want to be able to securely store your passwords. You want to be able to have something that creates good passwords. Because what's the problem with passwords? People reuse them. So if one is compromised, they're going to go and try and use that password on every other site you have. If your password to, like there was a breach with LinkedIn a few years ago, or the passwords were breached, and I think they were breached in clear text. What do you think people did? They took those LinkedIn passwords and tried them on your Amazon, you tried them on Microsoft 365, your Google, like all that kind of thing. So you want to create hard to guess passwords still. I'm good with these passphrases. These are fine. Egging steadily, badass race. I don't know what that badass race was. It some kind of NASCAR or something? I don't know. But anyway, so they're kind of fun, a little easier to remember. Not so bad if you need to, but you still want them long enough that you might have to copy and paste them. You might want to share them with people. You might want to share, hey, me and my office manager have this one account to this one thing we both need to use, so we have to share a password. So you can share that with her and still keep it good without writing it down. Another great thing about these, because I'd like you to look everything I've been talking about for the last 47 minutes, I'd like you to also look for your personal life. And this is another great thing, family emergency mode for family and for business partners. So my family and I, we share a password management system, and my kids have it. And so they put some of their stuff in there, and we have, and my wife uses it, and I use it, and we have an emergency mode turned on. So by default, like my spouse does not have access to my passwords, but if they request access, there's a mechanism that if I don't respond to their request within a periodic time, I think I got it set for like 6 hours or 24 hours or something like that, she will get access to my passwords. Because maybe I'm in a coma or dead, and at that point, I'd probably really want her to have access to my passwords. Same for business partners, things like that. So guard your secrets. These aren't just passwords anymore. These could be other detailed information. People are putting copies of their passports in here, and photocopies of photos of their driver's license numbers, things like that, secrets. And these are very good at keeping secrets when it's done properly. Encryption, another thing. Encryption's tricky. It really is. In some cases, it's really easy, like on your smartphones and things like that. Most of those devices, if you have a modern iPhone or even Android, I think they're all encrypted by default. So if someone gets your phone, there's a certain basic encryption. Not all computers, like workstations, are by default these days. You still have our older machines that are sitting out there. Maybe that, maybe a new computer might come default where there's encryption on the hard drive, meaning that, if you can only have your password, you can't get in. But it's getting tricky. And we're seeing this show up in a lot of requests from insurance companies, and they're asking about what you're doing around encryption. Encryption is that idea you've got something that you can see, and you want it to get somebody else so they can see it, But in the middle, you want to make sure in the middle they can't see it. So someone who gets it in between you and that other conversation, there's an encryption process, and there's different ways of doing it. And then when the other person gets it, they can see it unencrypted. If you have Microsoft 365, for example, and you've got the right tier of service, they've got Office message encryption. So they've got the ability to encrypt emails to clients and things like that, because email by itself is not automatically encrypted. You want to make sure your mobile devices and your removable media, if you've got data stored on flash drives or hard drives or laptops floating around, you want to make sure all that stuff is encrypted, because those get lost or stolen, and you want to verify that's not on there. But some of these other things are tricky, and you want to not be fooled by what they're talking about. So you might see something like Dropbox, for example, and Dropbox will say that all of our data on our servers is encrypted at rest, and all in transit, it's all encrypted. And that's true. If someone got access to the Dropbox servers, it's going to be encrypted. If someone got access to intercepting your stream between you and Dropbox, it's encrypted. But if someone has access to your workstations and you've got Dropbox logged in and ready to go, and you can just drag and drop files to Dropbox because that's what it does, then they've got full access to everything unencrypted, because you don't go through any process. Once you log into Dropbox, that's it. You can drag and drop files. There's no process to take that Word or Excel spreadsheet that you do unless you're, as part of Dropbox to decrypt it. So they have full access to it if they're you. That's when we talked before about having that two-factor authentication when you log into Windows or to the VPN, because if they can get in on your workstation, they can act as you and see a lot of what you've got unencrypted. But you want to make sure you're encrypting where it makes sense. Least privilege. Least privilege, again, we talked before about that zero trust, meaning that we used to think that anything on the inside of our network we should just trust, including our people and our devices and everything. And now we're saying is no, don't do that. Not only don't you trust people by default, but you should not, even if you do trust them, they don't get the keys to the kingdom. They should only get what they need access to do their job. So if you've got a salesperson and they need only access to the sales and marketing folder, and they don't need access to the finance folder, don't give them access to the finance folder. Not because they might try and take the financial information, although that could be a possibility of something you're trying to prevent. But if their computer is attacked as them, they're going to have access to everything that they have access to. And so if they have access to the marketing folder, that's one level of concern. If they have access to the finance folder, they're going to have, the hacker's going to have that level of access. So you want to start to restrict what can happen. And this isn't just on access to files and folders. This is about your devices. This is about having a guest Wi-Fi network instead of giving people access to your internal network. This is about taking your camera security system and putting on its own network. Because if that camera security system gets hacked, because those are just little computers with cameras attached, don't think of them as cameras. Think of them as a computer with a camera. Don't think of it as a printer. Think of it as a computer that can print. All of those different devices on your network are all little threats that might be a problem. And if you have them all in your network and trusting them, it's a problem. It's a potential risk. So you want to know your risk and reduce your permissions to only what's required. And this takes something, but again, it's a journey. Start with that guest Wi-Fi network. Start with maybe putting your security cameras on a separate network. Start to do the basics. Get your phone system on a different network. Why do I say this is important? Because this is from Hewlett-Packard. In 2018, just read what's in that red box there. We are able to take complete control over the printer just by sending a malicious fax, said Yaniv Balmas, malware research team lead with Check Point. There is no prerequisite for this attack. All you need to do is send a malicious fax to the printer and you have control. So you had a printer, you had that printer on the inside of your network because that's where you put the printer, but guess what? It was plugged into a fax line because it's a fax machine. And you think, gosh, how could this be done? This just seems improbable. There it is. And then if you look at the next paragraph, they were able to use that to chain to another attack. So there was another glitch with Microsoft that if they didn't patch that, then they were able to take this and run the next exploit. So you can see, in this case, it was a zero trust issue because they have the printer on the inside of the network. And if it can have control, then they could do anything. But then when it chains to this, so if they didn't patch, or maybe if they had patched, it would have limited the scope of this attack. So you can see how these things start to come together. Are you updating the software on your printer? Your printer has software. I just got a new HP printer. It has a full-on firewall inside. A whole bunch of configuration. So when someone tells you, oh, I'll just plug this printer in and it takes a half hour to get it plugged in and connected to the network, they're right. Half hour to get it plugged in and connected to the network. And then several more hours of security configuration to make sure that you're not going to be hacked by your printer or your camera system or any of that other stuff. So we talk about managed security services here, and that's the idea of there are these technologies you need to have. And I mentioned that before, that we use best of breed technologies here. You want everybody using best of breed. There are some that are better than others and some that are glitchier than others. And there's a whole, for most of it, it's the kind of stuff two IT people would be having a beer over and arguing. As long as you're using top tier stuff, you're gonna be in good shape. It's about who's managing it and how they're managing it. It's the team and the process they're following. That's gonna make all the difference. So you wanna make sure you're touching and you've got all these different aspects of services where you need them and know what these are and whether you need them, what's minimum table stakes, what stuff that you can start to add on later. But you're gonna have to modernize your security stack for a lot of you, including some of you that might be existing Tobin clients. We're starting to have, if we haven't already had a conversation with you about it, it'll be coming. We talk about it a lot in our newsletters and all of that, but more face-to-face conversations on it. Okay. So action, implement a modern security stack, start to get on that journey and start to put these things in place. So here's all our best practices. Get your security assessment done, get your insurance handled, do your disaster recovery test and inspect it. Don't just take their word for it. That's a show me thing. Show me that it works. You should actually be testing it. Someone should log into your database, make sure that they can get access to your files, all of that stuff, make sure it works. Patch and update everything, not just your software. You got a TV sitting in your conference room that's plugged into the internet. That's not a TV. It's a computer with a big screen on your wall. And that has software in it. You want to patch that, make sure it's updated if it's on your network. You want to isolate that, put it into a separate network. Multi-factor authentication everywhere. Security awareness training. Your secrets and passwords, get a password manager. Encrypt data where you need it. That email encryption is a pretty nice, easy thing to add on, especially if you like Microsoft 365. It's real straightforward to get turned on. And you can have a nice way of encrypting when you're sending out credit cards and social security numbers or contracts or things like that. And it's nice from a reputation standpoint. It shows you take security seriously. And by the way, you could be advertising to some of your clients that you take security seriously. It's not a bad marketing thing. Hey, we invest heavily in security to keep your data safe. You want to implement that principle of least privilege? Start to limit the spread. If that printer gets hacked, you want to make sure that it's not going to spread to the rest of the network. You want people to print, but not have it be as much of a threat. There's ways to do that. And then you got to manage and monitor your systems for the attacks, for the anomalies, for the breaches with that modern managed security stack. Someone's got to be watching this stuff because it's happening 24/7. And there's a lot of false alarms and there's a lot of noise and it's got to be looked at. It takes some time, takes experts, but sometimes, the anomaly is there first before the actual symptoms of the attack show up. And so you want someone watching that. You want to get these things in place to avoid them. and be protected in the end if anything happens. So best practice action here. Grab your calendar right now. Schedule yourself to act. We are done with this. Thank you so much. You can be happy and celebrate. Get on your journey now. Call us with any questions about anything on here. Follow up with the survey that Amanda's going to send you on how I did and what we can do to improve or any future topics. If you want this conversation happening inside your office and you want me to bring that in there or in your other business or in your community or on that nonprofit that you're a board of or your church or any of that stuff, you can do that too. Your business groups. I'm speaking to a large group of dealers next week for boats. So I'm excited about that. And so I like those opportunities. And check us on social media. Any questions? I'll be around. We went over here a little bit, so I'm going to stick around for a couple minutes for those of you that want to hang out. Otherwise, this concludes it. Great. Have a great day. Be safe. Get in action.